Control your mind, and you control the game. The Stoics believed that no one could disturb your peace unless you allowed it. But what happens when you're dealing with someone who seems to know exactly how to get under your skin? Women, knowingly or unknowingly, sometimes use mind games to test, manipulate, or gauge your emotional strength. In this video, we'll uncover 7 mind games women play to mess with your head and how you can counter them like a true Stoic, calm, composed, and always in control. Stick around till the end, because the last tactic might be the one that's been subtly throwing you off balance. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your experiences in the comments. Let's dive into the psychology behind these games and how to master them. Chapter 1. Guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is one of the oldest and most effective manipulation tactics. It preys on your empathy and moral compass, pushing you to feel responsible for things that may be exaggerated, taken out of context, or beyond your control. When guilt is used strategically, it can shift the dynamic in her favor, leaving you questioning your intentions, actions, or even your self-worth. Women might employ guilt tripping as a way to steer arguments, gain leverage, or influence your decisions. For example, she might say, "If you really cared about me, you wouldn't spend so much time at work," or "You must not love me if you forgot that small thing I mentioned." On the surface, these statements may appear emotionally charged and sincere, but they often serve as subtle attempts to plant doubt in your actions and intentions. The goal is to make you feel like you're falling short, even when you aren't. The Stoics had a profound understanding of guilt and its role in human behavior. To them, guilt was only valid if it arose from violating one's own principles or moral code. If your actions are aligned with your values and you've acted with integrity, then external attempts to make you feel guilty are powerless. As Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This clarity of conscience is your shield against manipulation. When faced with guilt tripping, it's essential to remain calm and grounded. Take a moment to assess whether there's any truth to the accusation. If you genuinely made a mistake, acknowledge it and take responsibility. However, if the guilt being placed on you is unwarranted, stand firm in your actions. For instance, you could respond with something like, "I understand why you might feel that way, but I know my intentions were good." This statement respects her emotions without surrendering your integrity. One of the key aspects of combating guilt tripping is separating emotions from logic. Manipulative guilt often relies on emotional appeals to cloud your judgment and compel you to act out of a sense of obligation. Instead of letting her framing of the situation dictate your response, focus on the facts. For example, if she accuses you of not prioritizing her because you spent a weekend with friends, reflect on the broader context of your relationship. Are you generally attentive and supportive? If the answer is yes, then her attempt to guilt you is likely more about control than an actual issue. It's also important to recognize patterns in behavior. Occasional guilt tripping might stem from a moment of insecurity or frustration, but if it becomes a regular occurrence, it's a red flag. Consistent manipulation erodes trust and creates a dynamic where you're constantly walking on eggshells to avoid provoking guilt. In these situations, setting boundaries is essential. A firm yet kind statement like, "I won't let guilt be the basis of our communication," can help reframe the dynamic and establish healthier interaction. The Stoics also teach us the value of perspective. Epictetus reminds us, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Guilt tripping thrives on your reaction. If you become defensive, overly apologetic, or self-critical, you feed into the manipulation. Instead, respond with calm confidence. A simple statement such as, "I hear what you're saying, but I need us to focus on solutions rather than blame," can redirect the conversation and neutralize the guilt trip. To further protect yourself, cultivate self-awareness and self-validation. When you're confident in your values and decisions, external attempts to guilt you lose their impact. Regularly reflect on your actions and ask yourself, am I acting in alignment with my principles? Am I treating others with fairness and respect? If the answer is yes, then there's no reason to internalize undeserved guilt. It's also worth considering her perspective. While guilt tripping is manipulative, it often stems from underlying insecurities or unmet emotional needs. Instead of reacting with frustration, try to uncover the root cause of her behavior. For example, if she's guilt-tripping you about not spending enough time together, it might be her way of expressing a desire for more connection. By addressing the underlying issue directly, you can diffuse the manipulation and foster healthier communication. However, addressing the root cause doesn't mean excusing the behavior. Manipulation, no matter the reason, isn't acceptable. By calmly calling it out, you set a precedent for honesty and respect. For instance, you could say, I want us to address concerns openly, but using guilt doesn't help either of us. This approach acknowledges her feelings while reinforcing the need for constructive communication. Finally, remember that guilt can be a powerful tool for growth when used appropriately. Genuine guilt, stemming from actions that go against your values, can lead to self-improvement and stronger relationships. But unwarranted guilt, imposed by others to serve their own agenda, must be met with resilience. In summary, guilt tripping is a mind game that relies on your sense of responsibility and empathy. By staying grounded in your principles, separating emotion from logic, and setting clear boundaries, you can effectively counter this tactic. Approach the situation with both strength and understanding, and you'll not only disarm the manipulation, but also foster a healthier dynamic built on mutual respect. Chapter 2: Silent Treatment. The silent treatment is one of the most frustrating and effective mind games, often employed as a passive-aggressive method of exerting control. When she suddenly stops talking or responding, it's typically designed to make you feel anxious, confused, or desperate to fix the situation. The silence creates a void that you instinctively want to fill, leading you to chase her for answers or apologies, even if you're not entirely sure what you did wrong. At its core, the silent treatment isn't about communication, it's about power. By withholding her attention and leaving you in the dark, she manipulates the emotional dynamic to her advantage. The Stoics, however, teach us that external actions, such as someone else's silence, don't have the power to disturb us unless we allow them to. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When faced with the silent treatment, your initial reaction might be to fix the problem immediately. You may feel tempted to call, text, or plead for clarity. Resist this urge. The more you chase her, the more control you hand over. Instead, stay calm and centered. Recognize that her silence isn't inherently harmful, it only gains power if you allow it to dictate your emotions. Use the silence to your advantage. Instead of reacting impulsively, take a step back and reflect. Ask yourself whether there's a legitimate issue that needs addressing. Did something happen that may have upset her? If so, acknowledge it without over-apologizing or groveling. For example, a calm message like, I sense that something is bothering you. Let me know when you're ready to talk. Demonstrates emotional maturity without compromising your dignity. However, if this behavior is part of a recurring pattern, a tactic to test your patience or assert control, it's important to handle it differently. The Stoics emphasized the importance of focusing on what you can control and letting go of what you can't. You cannot force her to talk, but you can control how you respond. By maintaining your composure, you show her that the silent treatment doesn't unsettle you. This doesn't mean you ignore her completely. Acknowledge her silence calmly, but don't feed into the dynamic. For instance, if she isn't responding to your texts, avoid bombarding her with messages. Instead, Let her take the lead in breaking the silence. By doing so, you subtly shift the balance of power, demonstrating that you're not dependent on her validation or attention. The silent treatment can also be an opportunity for self-reflection. Consider whether this behavior aligns with the kind of relationship dynamic you want. Is this a one-off occurrence stemming from a misunderstanding, or is it part of a larger pattern of manipulation? Healthy communication involves openness and honesty, not emotional stonewalling. If this is a regular tactic, it may indicate deeper compatibility issues that need addressing. One of the most powerful responses to the silent treatment is to continue living your life as usual. Engage in activities that bring you joy and fulfillment. Go to the gym, meet friends, work on a project, or simply enjoy some alone time. By showing that her silence doesn't disrupt your routine, you project confidence and independence. This response not only protects your emotional well-being, but also makes her realize that her tactic isn't working. When the silence finally breaks, and it often will, approach the conversation with calmness and clarity. Avoid accusations or resentment, as this can escalate the situation. Instead, express your feelings assertively. I noticed you weren't communicating with me. It's important to me that we address issues directly rather than through silence. This approach opens the door to constructive dialogue while setting a clear boundary against future silent treatments. Over time, consistent responses like these teach her that the silent treatment won't achieve a desired effect. She'll learn that open communication is the only way to resolve conflicts and maintain a healthy connection with you. It's also worth noting that not all silence is manipulative. Sometimes, people withdraw because they're processing their emotions or dealing with stress. The key is to recognize the difference between genuine introspection and deliberate stonewalling. If her silence feels like a genuine need for space, respect it while keeping the lines of communication open. Take your time. I'm here when you're ready to talk. Ultimately, dealing with the silent treatment is about maintaining your emotional balance and not letting someone else's actions dictate your state of mind. By practicing Stoic principles, calmness, self-reflection, and focusing on what you can control, you protect your inner peace and demonstrate emotional strength. In summary, the silent treatment is a mind game that loses its power when met with composure and self-assurance. Recognize it for what it is, an attempt to manipulate your emotions. Instead of reacting impulsively, stay calm, reflect on the situation, and set boundaries for healthier communication. By doing so, you not only disarm the tactic, but also strengthen your sense of self. Chapter 3: Gaslighting. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious forms of manipulation, designed to make you question your own perception of reality. It's a psychological tactic that can leave you doubting your memory, feelings, and even your sanity. This mind game is especially dangerous because it erodes your confidence over time, making you more susceptible to further manipulation. A woman engaging in gaslighting might dismiss your feelings or rewrite events to suit her narrative. Phrases like "that never happened," "you're imagining things," or "you're being too sensitive" are common tools of this strategy. The goal is to make you second-guess yourself and feel unsure about what's true. Over time, this can create a dynamic where you rely on her version of reality rather than trusting your own. The Stoics taught that our perception is our most powerful tool. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. When faced with gaslighting, the first step is to trust your own observations. Ground yourself in your internal truth. If you feel uncertain, take a step back to reflect on the situation objectively. Write down events as you remember them, detailing what was said, how you felt, and any supporting evidence. This practice not only strengthens your confidence, but also serves as a safeguard against manipulation. Gaslighting thrives on emotional reaction. If you become defensive or overly emotional, you feed into the manipulator's plan, giving them more power to twist the narrative. The Stoics believed in responding with calm and rationality, no matter the provocation. When she says something like, "You're overreacting," instead of arguing, respond with composed confidence, "I see it differently, and my feelings are valid." This approach asserts your perspective without escalating the conflict. Another effective strategy is to redirect the focus to the issue at hand. Gaslighting often serves as a distraction, steering the conversation away from the real problem and toward your supposed shortcomings. Don't fall for this bait. If she says, "You're always so paranoid," calmly steer the conversation back. "We can discuss my concerns, but I'd like to address what we were talking about first." This keeps the discussion productive and prevents her from gaining control over the narrative. It's important to recognize patterns of gaslighting. One-off instances might stem from miscommunication or stress, but repeated behavior indicates a deeper issue. If gaslighting becomes a recurring theme, set clear boundaries. The Stoics emphasized the importance of protecting your peace. Firmly but respectfully state, "I feel dismissed when my perspective isn't acknowledged." Moving forward, I'd like us to focus on understanding each other instead of dismissing our feelings. Building your resilience against gaslighting also involves reinforcing your sense of self. Surround yourself with people who support and validate you. Share your experiences with trusted friends or a mentor to gain an outside perspective. Often, talking about the situation helps you see it more clearly and affirm that your feelings are valid. While it's crucial to protect yourself from gaslighting, it's also helpful to understand why it happens. Often, people who gaslight are acting out of their own insecurities or a need to maintain control. By reframing their behavior as a reflection of their inner struggles, you can detach emotionally and avoid taking their actions personally. For instance, if she says, "You're making a big deal out of nothing," remind yourself that this response might stem from her discomfort in dealing with conflict. Recognizing this doesn't excuse the behavior, but it helps you stay calm and avoid getting drawn into the manipulation. Over time, consistent gaslighting can erode trust in a relationship. If efforts to address the issue don't lead to meaningful change, you may need to evaluate whether the relationship is healthy for you. The Stoics believed in prioritizing your peace and aligning your life with your values. If someone consistently undermines your sense of reality, it may be time to let go. Finally, focus on cultivating inner strength and self-assurance. The stronger your sense of self, the harder it is for anyone to manipulate you. Reflect daily on your values, actions, and decisions. The Stoics often practice negative visualization, imagining challenges and preparing for them mentally. This technique can help you anticipate and respond effectively to manipulative behavior, ensuring you remain in control of your reality. In summary, gaslighting is a powerful but ultimately futile tool when faced with a grounded, self-aware individual. Trust your observations, respond with calm confidence, and set firm boundaries. By embodying the Stoic principles of rationality and self-control, you not only disarm the manipulation, but also emerge stronger and more centered. Chapter 4. Projection. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism where someone attributes their own thoughts, feelings, or insecurities onto another person. In relationships, this often manifests as accusations or assumptions that are rooted more in her inner struggles than in your actual behavior. For example, she might accuse you of being distant when she's the one pulling away emotionally, or she could claim you're being unfaithful when she's battling her own trust issues or unresolved guilt. This mind game can be especially frustrating because it flips the narrative, placing you on the defensive for something you didn't do. The Stoics understood this dynamic well. They believed that the way others perceive and treat us often reflects their inner turmoil more than it reveals anything about our true character. Recognizing projection for what it is can help you detach emotionally and respond with clarity and control. When faced with projection, your first instinct might be to defend yourself or prove her accusations wrong. However, defensiveness only fuels the game, making it seem as though there's merit to her claims. Instead, practice the Stoic principle of calm inquiry. When she accuses you of something unfounded, respond with measured curiosity. What makes you feel that way? Or can you explain why this is bothering you? These questions achieve two things. They redirect the focus back onto her emotions and encourage self-reflection, potentially exposing the real source of her concerns. For instance, if she says, "You're always distracted when we're together," and you know that's not true, avoid jumping into a rebuttal. Instead, calmly say, "What makes you feel that way? I'd like to understand." This approach shifts the energy of the conversation from accusation to exploration, giving her space to articulate her feelings while keeping you grounded. Often, when someone projects, they are unaware that they're doing it. By encouraging dialogue, you help bring their unconscious patterns into the open. Projection is also a way to avoid personal accountability. Instead of addressing their insecurities or behaviors, someone projecting shifts the spotlight onto you. For example, if she's insecure about her own trustworthiness, she might accuse you of being unfaithful. In these moments, it's essential to remember that her accusations are not a reflection of your actions, but of her internal conflict. The Stoics teach us to detach from external opinions and focus on maintaining our integrity. Rather than internalizing her words, remind yourself of your values and actions, which speak louder than baseless claims. Another way to handle projection effectively is to establish clear boundaries. If her accusations become repetitive or escalate, calmly but firmly state your position. "I understand that you're feeling this way, but I need you to know that these accusations don't reflect my actions. Let's focus on what's really going on." By setting this boundary, you refuse to engage in a cycle of blame and redirection, signaling that you won't be drawn into her emotional turmoil. Projection can also be an opportunity for growth, both hers and yours. For her, it's a chance to confront the insecurities or unresolved issues that are fueling her behavior. For you, it's a chance to practice emotional resilience and empathy without compromising your boundaries. The Stoics believe that every challenge, no matter how frustrating, is an opportunity to cultivate virtue. In this case, the virtues of patience, understanding, and steadfastness are key. It's also helpful to observe patterns over time. Occasional projection can happen to anyone, especially during moments of stress or vulnerability. However, if projection becomes a constant dynamic in your relationship, it's important to address it more directly. Have an open and honest conversation about how this behavior affects you and the relationship. Use "I" statements to express your feelings without sounding accusatory. "I feel misunderstood when I'm blamed for things that don't reflect my actions. I want us to communicate in a way that brings us closer instead of creating distance." Remember, projection only has power over you if you let it. By remaining grounded, self-assured, and open to dialogue, you can neutralize its impact. When she realizes that her accusations don't provoke the reaction she expects, she may begin to question the effectiveness of this tactic. Over time, this can lead to healthier and more transparent communication. In essence, dealing with projection is about recognizing what truly belongs to you and what doesn't. Her insecurities and accusations are hers to own, not yours to carry. As the Stoics teach, focus on what you can control: your actions, your emotions, and your responses. When you approach projection with calmness, clarity, and confidence, you not only diffuse the immediate situation, but also demonstrate the emotional strength that sets you apart. Chapter 5: Feigned Ignorance. Feigned ignorance is a subtle yet effective mind game that can leave you feeling frustrated and stuck in a loop of confusion. When she pretends not to understand something, it's often a way to avoid accountability, deflect responsibility, or shift the conversation away from an uncomfortable topic. This tactic can feel maddening because it undermines progress and clarity, leaving you questioning whether she's genuinely confused or intentionally manipulative. Imagine this scenario. You remind her of an agreement, like, "We said we'd talk about this issue today," and she responds with, "Oh, I didn't realize you meant today specifically." Or perhaps you mention a recurring behavior, such as forgetting to follow through on plans, and she counters with, "I didn't know that was such a big deal to you." These responses aren't outright confrontational, but they subtly shift the focus away from her accountability and onto your perceived miscommunication. The Stoics valued clarity and directness in communication, believing that misunderstandings often arise from vague or unspoken expectations. The key to neutralizing feigned ignorance is to set clear, unambiguous boundaries and expectations from the outset. Instead of getting drawn into her deflection or trying to argue the details of what she didn't realize, focus on calmly and assertively restating your point. For example, if she deflects with, "I didn't think you meant right away," respond with something like, "Let's be clear moving forward. When we agree on something, let's make sure we're on the same page about what it means." This approach not only reinforces your boundaries, but also signals that you're not willing to engage in circular arguments or excuses. Another example might involve plans or commitments. Suppose she regularly pretends not to understand the importance of sticking to agreed-upon schedules, saying things like, "Oh, I didn't realize you were serious about that." Instead of reacting emotionally or accusing her of playing games, stay composed and redirect the conversation. "I'd like us to be on the same page next time. Can we agree on how we'll handle this going forward?" This shifts the focus from her deflection to a proactive, solution-oriented dialogue. It's essential to remain calm and unemotional during these interactions. Feigned ignorance often relies on provoking frustration or exasperation, which can then be used to make you seem unreasonable or overly sensitive. The Stoics believed in mastering your emotional responses, recognizing that losing control only gives others power over you. When you maintain a composed and logical demeanor, you deny her the opportunity to derail the conversation. Another effective tactic is to seek specific commitments in response to her ambiguity. For example, if she avoids taking responsibility for something by claiming she didn't understand, ask for her input directly. "How would you interpret what we discussed? I want to make sure we're aligned moving forward." This forces her to engage in the conversation and eliminates the option of hiding behind vagueness in the future. However, it's also important to recognize patterns. Occasional misunderstandings can happen in any relationship, but if feigned ignorance becomes a repeated tactic, it may indicate a deeper issue. Perhaps she struggles with confrontation, fears admitting fault, or is intentionally using this as a way to avoid accountability. The Stoics believed in addressing root causes rather than surface-level symptoms, so it's worth exploring whether the dynamic stems from poor communication habits or a lack of respect for your boundaries. When addressing this pattern, it's crucial to frame your concerns in a way that fosters understanding rather than blame. For instance, you might say, "I've noticed that sometimes we seem to misinterpret each other. I want to make sure we're both feeling heard and understood. Can we talk about how we can improve our communication?" This invites collaboration and minimizes defensiveness, increasing the likelihood of resolving the issue. At the same time, remain firm in your principles. The Stoics emphasized the importance of integrity and self-respect. If she continues to use feigned ignorance as a way to manipulate or evade accountability despite your efforts to communicate clearly, you must evaluate whether this aligns with the kind of relationship you want to maintain. Ultimately, dealing with feigned ignorance requires patience, clarity, and a commitment to honest communication. By refusing to get drawn into her deflections, calmly reinforcing your boundaries, and seeking solutions rather than arguments, you neutralize this mind game and strengthen the foundation of mutual respect in your relationship. Chapter 6. Tantrums. Emotional outbursts or tantrums are among the most overt ways someone may try to seize emotional control in a relationship. Whether it's raised voices, dramatic reactions, or tears designed to provoke guilt, tantrums are often a test of your emotional resilience. The intention may not always be malicious. Sometimes they stem from genuine frustration or insecurity. But regardless of the motive, handling them poorly can leave you feeling drained, manipulated, or off balance. The Stoics mastered the art of apatheia, a state of calm indifference to external chaos. They believed that while you cannot control how others behave, you can always control how you respond. This principle is key when faced with a tantrum. Emotional storms feed on escalation. If you match her energy, whether by yelling back, becoming defensive, or storming off, it only amplifies the situation and validates the outburst. Instead, aim to be the grounding force in the moment. Lower your tone of voice, slow your speech, and remain physically composed. A calm demeanor has a disarming effect, sending the message that you won't be pulled into the chaos. For example, if she's raising her voice or making accusations, respond with something like, "I hear that you're upset. Let's take a breath and figure out how we can solve this together." This approach not only diffuses the situation, but also sets a standard for mature conflict resolution. It's essential to recognize that tantrums often stem from an attempt to provoke a reaction. By remaining unshaken, you signal emotional strength and self-control, two qualities that naturally command respect. Over time, this teaches her that outbursts are ineffective in influencing you. However, staying calm doesn't mean ignoring the issue. Once the immediate intensity of the tantrum subsides, it's important to address the underlying cause. Wait until both of you are in a more composed state, then initiate a logical, solution-focused conversation. You might say, "I understand that earlier. Emotions were running high. Let's talk about what's really bothering you so we can work through it together." This demonstrates that you're willing to engage without condoning the behavior. A tantrum may also be a way of testing your boundaries. If you repeatedly give in to demands made during an emotional outburst, it sets a precedent that such behavior will get results. The Stoics believed in living by principles, not reacting impulsively to external pressures. In this context, it means maintaining your boundaries even in the face of emotional manipulation. If her tantrum is aimed at getting her way, like insisting on changing plans at the last minute, stand firm. "I understand you're upset, but I can't change my decision right now. Let's talk about it later." It's equally important to assess the frequency and intensity of the tantrums. Occasional emotional flare-ups can happen in any relationship, especially during stressful times. But if tantrums become a pattern or escalate to manipulative levels, it's a sign of deeper issues. This might include an inability to manage emotions or a lack of respect for the relationship's balance. The Stoics taught that self-respect begins with setting boundaries. If her tantrums are frequent and disruptive, consider having a candid discussion about how they affect you. Frame it in a way that expresses concern for the relationship's well-being rather than placing blame. When things get emotional like this, it's hard for me to understand how to help. I think it's important for us to find healthier ways to communicate. This reinforces your commitment to a constructive dynamic while making it clear that emotional outbursts won't be tolerated. While tantrums can be challenging to navigate, they also offer an opportunity to strengthen your emotional resilience. Each time you handle an outburst with calm and poise, you reinforce your ability to remain composed under pressure. This not only benefits the relationship, but also enhances your overall emotional intelligence, a skill that's invaluable in all areas of life. Finally, it's worth considering the long-term implications of this dynamic. If you're consistently dealing with tantrums, ask yourself whether the relationship aligns with your values and emotional needs. The Stoics believed in cultivating relationships that foster mutual growth and respect. While no relationship is perfect, a consistent pattern of emotional volatility may indicate a deeper incompatibility that shouldn't be ignored. By approaching tantrums with calm, logic, and clear boundaries, you not only diffuse the immediate conflict, but also establish yourself as a stable and emotionally strong partner. This not only commands respect, but also sets the foundation for a healthier, more balanced relationship moving forward. Chapter 7. Playing the Victim. Playing the victim is one of the most subtle yet potent mind games, designed to appeal directly to your sense of empathy. It works by making you feel guilty or responsible for situations that may not even be your fault. A woman using this tactic might exaggerate her struggles, downplay her role in a conflict, or cast herself as the sole victim of circumstances. The goal is to shift the focus away from her accountability and onto your perceived shortcomings. Imagine this scenario. You call her out for canceling plans at the last minute, and instead of addressing it, she responds with, "I've just been so stressed lately, and now I feel like you don't even understand how hard things are for me." Suddenly, the conversation shifts from her accountability to your perceived lack of support, leaving you feeling guilty and questioning your actions. The Stoics emphasized the importance of emotional discernment, knowing when to extend compassion and when to guard against manipulation. Empathy is a virtue, but it must be grounded in reason. You can recognize and validate someone's feelings without taking on blame that doesn't belong to you. When confronted with this tactic, it's crucial to maintain your composure. Respond with measured empathy, such as, "I'm sorry you're feeling overwhelmed. Let's talk about what we can do to address this together." This approach acknowledges her emotions without reinforcing the victim narrative or letting the conversation derail. To counteract the victim mindset effectively, focus on solutions rather than lingering on the problem. For instance, if she repeatedly casts herself as powerless or misunderstood, steer the dialogue toward actionable steps. What can we do to make this better? Or how can we avoid this situation in the future? This subtly challenges her to step out of the victim role and engage in a more balanced and productive conversation. At the same time, it's essential to protect your own mental space. Recognize when her claims of victimhood are persistent and unchanging, as this may indicate a deeper pattern of emotional manipulation. The Stoics taught that your peace of mind should not be contingent on external influences. When someone consistently plays the victim, it can create a toxic dynamic where you're perpetually on the defensive, feeling obligated to fix their problems or cater to their emotions. In such cases, take a step back and reflect on the relationship dynamic. Are you being drawn into a cycle where you're constantly made to feel responsible for her happiness? If so, it might be time to set boundaries. Firm yet respectful statements like, "I care about you, but I can't take responsibility for things outside my control," help re-establish equilibrium without alienating her. Another layer to this mind game is how it can subtly erode your confidence. When someone continually positions themselves as the victim, it can make you second-guess your own actions, intentions, and even your worth. This is where Stoic self-awareness becomes your greatest ally. Remind yourself of your values and principles. If you've acted with integrity and fairness, you have no reason to internalize undue guilt or blame. Ironically, playing the victim can also be a sign of insecurity on her part. By seeking constant validation or placing the responsibility for her feelings onto others, she's often expressing a deeper need for reassurance. While it's not your job to fix her insecurities, you can address them constructively by encouraging open communication and emotional independence. For example, if she says something like, "You never listen to me," counter with, "I'm here to listen, but I also need to understand how we can move forward from here." This response reinforces your willingness to engage while subtly redirecting the conversation away from blame and toward resolution. Finally, remember that your own emotional health is paramount. Playing the victim is a tactic that thrives on imbalance. If you feel constantly drained, guilty, or unsure of yourself, the game is working. The Stoics believed in focusing on what you can control, and in this context, that means maintaining your boundaries, asserting your values, and refusing to let manipulation dictate your actions. By staying grounded and prioritizing solutions over blame, you not only protect your peace, but also encourage a healthier and more balanced relationship dynamic. Mind games are only as effective as the power you give them. By adopting Stoic principles, calmness, self-awareness, and emotional resilience, you can navigate these tactics with grace and confidence. Remember, the ultimate goal isn't to win against her, but to maintain your inner peace and integrity. When you master your own mind, no one can mess with it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your experiences in the comments below. Let us know which of these mind games you've encountered and how you've handled them. See you in the next episode.